So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second installment of the shooting process of the videography course that we're analyzing. In this lesson right here, we're going to be analyzing shooting outdoors. Now, shooting outdoors is very similar with shooting indoors when it comes to the aspects that you need to pay attention to. Obviously, we have the camera, the light source, the sound source, and the subject. Now, that being said, many parameters do change while shooting outdoors, and this is what we're highlighting in this lesson right here. In general, we're going to divide this lesson into subject-dependent and subject-independent shoots, and obviously we're going to dive deeper to analyze what changes in those two different environments. So I'm very excited. Let's launch our slides and let's dive into outdoors shooting. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 9th installment of this course, the 9th lesson of this course, in which we're going to be talking about shooting outdoors. This is going to be our lecture outline. We're going to start with the introduction, then we're going to move into the two different subcategories of shooting outdoors. Again, shooting B-roll, so a subject without actually talking to the camera, and then shooting a subject while talking to the camera, the so-called A-roll. Finally, we're going to close this lesson right here, in which, again, we're going to have a lot of information with a recap. So, enough of talking, let's move into the introduction of this lesson. So, shooting outdoors is very actually similar with shooting indoors. Again, there are some key parameters in which we are very, very interested. Of course, these are our camera settings, our lights, our audio, and our subjects. That being said, of course, there are some parameters that change while shooting outdoors, and this is why we have a separate lesson on outdoors shooting. In general, there are some pros and some cons. The pros while shooting outdoors is that obviously you can get more creative, there is more interesting light from the sun, more subjects to play around, and more stuff to film in general. The cons are the constantly changing lighting and weather conditions. Especially the lights are going to be a huge issue while shooting outdoors, and this is what you'll learn how to navigate around in this lesson. Again, outdoor shoots, just like indoor shoots, are subdivided into categories: subject-dependent and subject-independent. Subject-dependent outdoor shoots, or A-roll, are usually going to be interviews or vlogs, which we're going to be analyzing in the next lesson. Subject-independent outdoor shoots are usually going to be B-roll shoots. I want you to know that in all of the categories that we're going to be analyzing in this lesson, the key is to adapt in the constantly changing weather and lighting conditions. This is the major challenge while shooting outside, and this is why most creatives actually go ahead and set up a studio, just like I have done in my interior environment, so we don't have continuously changing lighting conditions. But this is what we're called to navigate again around while shooting outside. So this was the introduction. Let's dive into the two categories of shooting, starting with B-roll. When it comes to shooting B-roll outside, this is one of the most common areas you will be found shooting when it comes to videography. First, we're going to start with the gear that you're going to need. And I want you to remember that less is more while shooting B-roll outside. The less gear you have, the less stuff you need to stress about, and the more creative you can be. That being said, you are going to need a camera. Obviously, this is going to be your smartphone. It is good for you to have a camera bag to store most of your gear so you don't have gear just flying everywhere. It is good for you to stabilize your gear, and we had a separate lesson on stabilization. You're an expert now on stabilization, and sometimes if you want to up it up a notch, you can have a diffuser with you to diffuse again the harsh sunlight of the sun, which is our biggest enemy. Now let's start with the gear. As we said, the camera is going to be your smartphone, and smartphones actually do a great job in changing automatically and adapting to the different lighting conditions out there. If you can recall, in the shooting indoors lesson, I advised you to download a plugin to help to change the ISO, the frame rate, and the shutter speed of your camera. In fact, when it comes to shooting outdoors, I would want you to delete this plugin and let your smartphone do automatically all the adapting and the changing to the different weather conditions. This usually applies in 99% of cases, unless there is a very cloudy day and you know that the clouds aren't going anywhere, and this is pretty much the exception in which we're going to have steady and constant lighting conditions while shooting outside. But 99% of cases, just set your camera and your smartphone camera to auto mode. It will manage perfectly. Let's move to the second gear piece you need to shoot B-roll outside, and this is pretty much going to be a camera bag. Now, a camera bag is obviously not essential. It is recommended, and inside your camera bag, you should find a power bank to power again your smartphone, which is your camera, a tripod if you want to have a steady shot again stabilized outside, more SD storage space, of course. We talked about the battery life and the SD storage of your phone, which is the factors that limit us for producing unlimited videos. And it is good for you to also have a backup camera, especially if you're traveling away from home and you don't have access to cameras that easily. So these are the recommended gear pieces that you should find inside your camera bag. In addition to that, depending on the environment that you're at, you could bring with you food, water, or different lenses, again, those clip lenses that could go to your phone. In general, it's good to have your camera bag to protect your gear and to be more organized in your shoots. Moving on, let's talk about stabilization, and B-roll stabilization is very important. As we said in the stabilization lesson of this course, the optimal stabilization choice is a gimbal. This right here is a gimbal. We talked about gimbals. This is the best way to stabilize your phone. If you go ahead and purchase a gimbal, please invest to a camera bag to store safely this gimbal, because in the outside conditions, you never know when it's going to rain, when dirt is going to be introduced to your gimbal mechanism. So make sure to safely store it in your camera bag. Moving on, if you want again to up it up a notch, you could invest and carry with you in your camera bag a diffuser. If you choose to shoot during midday when the sunlight is at its harshest point, it is good for you to manually diffuse the light that directly touches your subject. So bring a diffuser with you. There are some diffusers that can break down and fit into camera bags. In 90% of cases, you're not going to use it, so this is why I say that it is not essential. But in this 10% of cases that you will use a diffuser, you will see that it will very much help you with your videos. This right here is the biggest tip that I have to give you when it comes to outside B-roll shoots. The less gear you have to choose from, the more creative you will become. Trust me, there is nothing more frustrating than having 1 million different types of gear that you paid money for just hanging in your bag. You don't know what to choose from, so please be selective with your gear. Don't invest to every single gear piece that looks cool. All of us want to look like professional videographers, but trust me, even with just your phone, you can do amazing creative results. Don't let gear overwhelm you. I know that this course is very gear focused, but I'm just laying out all the options for you. Please don't get overwhelmed with gear. Here are some other tips that I want to focus on, because those tips I learned from experience, and I think this is the most valuable part of this lesson. Again, teaching you stuff based on my experience. So the first tip is to shoot short clips, brainstorm different angles, don't overthink shots, do plan ahead before the shoot, and keeping it simple. So let's go ahead and fastly analyze each one of those tips that I have to give you. The first one is to keep your clips short. You rarely use more than 10 seconds of your video, as you're going to find out in post-production editing. More than 10 seconds, you're probably never going to use from a video. So please decrease the length of your videos and increase the variety of different shots and different angles that you will produce. This will help you produce the best outcome, and this is why I suggest you to invest on a gimbal and not on a tripod. The gimbal is constantly changing its position, and we're constantly introducing new angles to our videos, whereas the tripod stays still. You have just one shot. So this is why I would prefer invest on a gimbal when it comes to stabilization rather than a tripod, again, on B-roll shoots outside. The next tip that I have to give you is that you should really try different angles. When I say different angles, I don't mean that you need to physically change from one location to another and drive away to have different angles. You can just back away, zoom out, zoom in, or just lower the camera from the place that you're at. It is very easy to change the composition of your frame just by some very subtle movements, or just by zooming in or again zooming out from your lens. Increasing the variety of different angles will increase the engagement of your viewers. And as we said, engagement is videography. Engagement of the viewers in videography is one of the most common, and as we said, engagement of the audience in videography, increasing the engagement of audience in videography is one of our biggest goals in this hobby. The next tip that I have to give you is to not overthink shots. Trust me, take capture as many shots as you want. You can simply delete them if they're trash in the post-production editing software. On top of that, I never want you to delete shots while you're outside in the field shooting. Keep it stored on your phone and let's delete it together in the post-production editing tutorial. Don't delete shots while you're outside in the shoots. Trust me, most of the best shots on the shoots are actually completely random, so don't delete them while you're outside. Keep them to delete them in post-production. Final tip that I have to give you is that you need to create a shot list. A shot list is a very basic list of some things that you need to capture outside in the field, in which you create beforehand. So the day, for example, before the shoot. This will save you a lot of time. It will help you arrange your thoughts and actually brainstorm more ideas as you're writing down your shots. So you will see that you're going to start writing down some shots that you want, and this will help you make up your mind to brainstorm more and more shots. This will increase your creativity and decrease the time that you're in the field just thinking of what shot to capture next. So please also create a shot list. The optimal scenario would be for you to have a brainstorm shot list, enter the scene which you want to shoot, and bang, 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 shoot your shots, get out of there. So please create a shot list. This will help you improve your videography massively. These were all of my tips and gear tips when it comes to B-roll. Let's move now to the subject dependent outdoors shooting, and these again are usually interviews. So we're going to start with the gear you're going to need, and then we're going to analyze interview tips. So pretty much the gear is the same with B-roll. So we need a camera, we need a backpack, a camera bag of course to store that, and in addition to that we are heavily investing. Now when it comes to outdoor interviews, the gear, pretty much the essential gear stays the same. We need a camera, we need a camera bag to store our camera and our gear, and we are heavily focusing, as we said in the introduction of this course, to light control. We need to stay focused and be able to control the constantly changing lighting environment of the outdoor scene. This is what you can see that this kid is doing in this image. He's pretty much holding a diffuser to again diffuse the harsh midday sunlight. Note that it is very important to diffuse, again I'm going to say this a million times, but it is very important for you to diffuse the harsh sunlight that is produced from the light in midday. If you don't want to invest on diffusers and have to focus that much on light control, make sure to either shoot during sunrise or during sunset. For some reason, during sunrise and during sunset, the light that comes from the sun is not harsh. It is very actually soft by its nature. It doesn't need to be diffused, and this is why you see most cinematic videos and most cinematic photographs are shot again during sunset or during sunrise. That being said, another video parameter that is constantly changing and we have no effects on to control is the sound. We talked about the lights, how they're constantly changing with the weather, how lights are naturally diffused by the clouds, of course the harsh sunlight of the sun, but another category of an outside element that we can't control is actually the sound, and this of course will interfere with our interviews. This is why we also need to focus on sound control when it comes to outside A-roll. Now sound control is very easy to be achieved. You just need a microphone that plugs in with your smartphone. In addition to that, you can also use your actual smartphone if you have a secondary one as a microphone. Just record sound and use it as a microphone to record yourself, or for example, please don't record with the internal sound of the phone that you use as a camera, as the camera will be away from the subject and a lot of sounds from the outdoor environment will interfere with your video and it will just ruin your interview. So remember that we need to invest on some kind of sound control equipment when it comes to outdoor interviews. As we also said in the indoor interviews, a slider and a tripod are suggested and recommended gear pieces when it comes to interviews. A slider, again, introduces subtle movements to our videos and makes the interviews more engaging, and they're not, again, that expensive if they're not motorized. If they're motorized, they can get expensive, so watch out for that. So to close the chapter of outdoor A-roll, outdoor interviews, here are 3 tips that I have to give you to help you fastly improve your video. First of all, you need to remember that light and sound are your worst enemy. You need to plan ahead from your shoots, and you need to remember that basic principles stay the same. Now let's go and analyze those 3 tips. Obviously, we talked about this a lot in this lesson. You need to diffuse the harsh sunlight from the sun that touches the subject. If it is during midday. Again, if it is during sunrise or sunset, it is okay not to diffuse it. And note when it comes to sound control that sometimes some basic natural sound effects may be okay to incorporate in our interviews. For example, in this interview scenario right here that you can see that is placed on the woods, some natural bird sound that might be captured with our audio could be okay to add with our interviews. Now, if you're trying to take an interview in the middle of New York City with all of the screaming and the noises from the road and the noises from the construction, this is not possible. You need heavy sound control. But there are exceptions, as there are always exceptions in videography. The second tip that I have to give you, and this also applied in the B-roll with the shot list, is to plan ahead. Plan ahead with creating a shot list. This will decrease the time that you spend setting up everything and will increase the time that you spend shooting. This is what I need you to focus on. I need you to decrease the time that you need to set up everything and know where the lights goes and know where the diffusers goes. I need you to brainstorm this beforehand, and this will give you more time to shoot, more time to edit, and more time to improve in this hobby. You need to be fast when it comes to setting up everything. Finally, and this is a slide in which I want to focus a lot, I need you to remember that in outdoor interviews, such as in indoor interviews, and most of the different types of shoots that we analyzed in this course, some basic videography principles always stay the same. And I'm giving you this image as an example. This is an image of an interview that is shot outdoors, and despite the fact that this is not a controlled environment, you can see, and when I say controlled, I mean we don't control the lights and the sound. This is of course shot outside. We have lights from the sun. This video applies to many principles that we discussed in this course. So this is why I want to analyze it with you. First of all, you can see that the eye of this person is located at the cross of the rule of thirds on the upper third. So the director of this interview correctly chose to follow the rule of thirds by placing the subject in the right third of the image. In addition to that, when it comes to composition, as you can recall, we also applied to the rule of leading lines. The director used these bushes as leading lines to guide the eye of the viewers to, again, the head and the eye of the subject in which we want to focus. When it comes to light, you can see we have a key light, a filler light, and a backlight that highlights the silhouette of the subject. How is this produced? Very simply, the director has placed a diffuser right here that diffuses the light that comes from the sun and produces this, again, highlights right here, the key light. Obviously, the rest of the face is filled with the natural light that bounces, for example, off the ground, so we don't need to physically add something to have a filler light. Outdoor conditions obviously are lit by themselves, and you have the backlight that highlights the silhouette of the subject, and this is achieved by the natural sunlight that comes and hits the subject from the back. So this is a great example of an outdoor interview that applies to most composition and lighting principles that we discussed in this course. So I know there was a lot of information in this course. In this lesson, let's go ahead and recap some of the most basic things that we talked about. So shooting outdoors and shooting indoors have many similarities, but they also have many differences. The biggest difference that shooting outdoors has from shooting indoors is the fact that we need to heavily control the light and the sound. These are two parameters that we don't have control while shooting outdoors. As we said, shooting outdoors is divided into two subcategories: shooting with a subject and shooting without a subject. Shooting with a subject is A-roll, shooting without a subject is B-roll. A-roll is usually interviews, and we analyze different gear pieces and the different tips when it comes to interviews. And again, B-roll is usually shot outside. It is more commonly shot outside rather than inside. And again, we analyze different gear and different tips that I have learned through my experience, and I want you to focus on when it comes to shooting B-roll outdoors. So this concludes our lesson in outdoors shooting, and again, this subcategory of this course when it comes to shooting. We analyzed in this lesson right here subject dependent and subject independent outdoors shoot and what to take care in each one of those subcategories. Now we're done with outdoor shoot. It is time to focus on a completely different type of shooting, which is of key importance in our days, and this is actually vlogging. So in the next lesson, we're going to discuss about vlogging.